Obviously, the discussion we're going to have today centers around the topic of the Black Lives Matter movement, if you want to call it that. Trey and I have already talked and come to agreement when we're talking about, I don't know how else to say it, the two different sides or the cultures or whatever that's coming in. We're going to talk about the white culture and the black culture. Those are the words we're going to use today, just so we have an understanding. But I'm going to really just maybe ask you some questions and let you go, and we'll, like we said, dialogue from there. I have for myself, I truly want to represent people from this area, and so I've asked some different people, and I've had this conversation, told them this was happening, and I got some of their questions and their thoughts. And again, what I love about Trey is these won't be easy ones, and but I know that I can ask him of you, and we can talk about it, and vice versa. So just to start out, Trey, when I've read some of your stuff, and obviously we've talked, when it comes to this whole topic of racism, and when you're calling out racism, what is racism to you? What are you referring to? And maybe just to keep going on that, the systematic racism we're talking about, what are you referring to? And how do you see it playing out in this part of the country where we live,
most
in Western
definitely.
Kansas?
When I think of racism, typically what that has looked like throughout history is you have a group of people who is in more of a power position, and that they take that platform and that power that is socially widely accepted, or I guess like indoctrinated to them, even like culturally passed down from generations, and they will typically exercise that power over other groups of people. And so let's just say in America, the predominant white culture has been turned around and has shown itself time and time again to, at times, sadly, look at others, whether it's Hispanic and Latino communities, Black community, Asian communities, and to almost put themselves in a higher position than the other. And that's just what I see is like the foundation for where racism starts, is you automatically put yourself on a pedestal here, and you see someone else as lower and less than. And then there's a lot of dangerous things that come from that. And so that's just what I see, is someone looking at another person as lesser than, especially based off of their ethnicity and race, their skin tone. And so when it comes to systematic racism, and when we talk about systematic this, systematic that, what that means is we've created systems and practices, and we've created a culture that has been accepted for hundreds of years in our country. And you cannot get rid of the history that the culture was founded on the fact that other people from other countries were taken and brought in here as lower than to do the work for the dominant power culture. And that automatically puts these people who were Black and brown predominantly, right, as less than and under. And so everything is always going to see the power culture, and it's going to support them, whether it's policing, whether it's judiciary systems, whether it's even the religious institutions around them. And it's going to cater to the power culture, and it's always going to treat these other people as less than and not give them the same resources, the same opportunity, the same access. And so when I think of that, I look at our long history, and I just see that there's a lot of systemic issues, and that has led to a lot of the conversations we're having today. So, yeah.
By the way, you're supposed to jump in on any of these.
I
saw them kind of moving and whatever, so and shifting. And also, guys, this could go a while. We know we only have Trey for a while, so we're gonna talk as much as we can until we have to go.
Yep.
Because we know this could. So obviously, the beauty of YouTube is you can shut it off and come back later if you have to. It's out there. It's gonna be out there.
And y'all challenge me anytime. I love it, man.
Well, how do you see that though here? Like, if someone like me says, "What do you mean? I don't see it." Well, I'll just go back to my friend Wade Norris back when I was doing youth ministry in Portland 18 years ago. We would go to Grand High School and do City Life every Monday. Afterwards, we'd go to lunch to Dew's Grill, and we would eat. Love that guy. Dew's Grill. It was like a teriyaki. It was so good. It was just a little hole in the wall, but it was so good. I went there every time. And he wanted to come to my wedding. He actually, he would have fun with it. He goes, I really want to come in with a cowboy hat and go, what's up, y'all? And come walking in the back of the church and just, so he was fun. But something happened, and I don't remember what it was at that time, where it called out kind of the same issue. And so there was conversation about it, and he made a comment about racism. I got defensive and upset, and I just said, man, I'm sick of being called a racist. Obviously, I'm not. You know, like, why do you keep saying this? Why does this keep coming up? And he, thankfully, modeled what we're talking about, because I was a little fired up and irritated, and he just said, no, I don't know if I would necessarily say you're intentionally racist, but I would say you're uneducated and maybe even ignorant and not understanding some of the things you do or say that are going on. And so, and he goes, but that's partly on me too, because I haven't told you.
Yeah.
Which again, that's what led to this whole thing. That's what's been going through my mind through all of
that's
this.
good.
So what could be, how could, I mean, when intentional racism kicks in, it's pretty obvious to everybody when that happens. And maybe you can share some stories where you've seen it here in Western Kansas.
For sure.
And I'd love if you did, because people may need to know if it's happening. They need to know it's happening, because I think there are some people that do not even believe it's happening.
100%.
But for those that know that it does happen, but that it also happens at times they don't realize, what are some things that you've seen?
Yeah. My experience alone, I don't even really have to tap into anyone else's. You know, when I first came here, I was attracted to Fort Hays the same way a lot of black students are, just to be honest, is like through athletics, right? And I came here to play football. I got hurt during camp and tore up my knee and had to get like reconstructive surgery. My mom came out, and my mom is a little white blonde woman from Southern California. And she came and picked me up, and we did the surgery or whatever. Coming out of the hospital, there used to be Smoothie King here in Hayes, and I had never had it, but in my drugged up surgery like self, I was like, I'm on Smoothie King, Mom, you know, and I'm just sitting there in the passenger seat. We start driving there, and as we're about to pull into Smoothie King, this older white gentleman jumps out in front of our car, and he looks at me dead in my face, you know, from outside of the vehicle, and just says, we do not want you here, you effing N-word. And my mom about took me home right then and there. It was like, you will not stay here, right? And that was my first, I mean, that was before all the students were here in Hayes. Like, this is one of my first introductions outside of the football world, which looks way different than the surrounding culture, right? And, you know, to continue on that path, I did a project in my leadership classes in undergrad, where you had to embody a different voice. And so I decided to take on the identity, if you would, to simulate what it looks like to be homeless in Hayes, Kansas for a weekend. And so, you know, I kind of made myself a little bit more presentable, had my little cardboard sign, and weekend was coming, and I was like, all right, I'm just not gonna go home and sleep. Like, I'm just gonna walk around town all weekend, we'll see what happens. And I just remember guys driving by and just racial slurs and just profanity, this and that. And walking by this one party and this, you know, more closer to the college campus, and everyone in this place, you know, they kind of talked in a certain way and looked a certain way, and I walked by and they were very quick to be like, you know, of course you're homeless, you dirty N-word, and da-da-da-da-da, and I just kept walking like, wow, man, like, I'm documenting things, like, I gotcha, you know what I mean? And I guess the last example I would use is 2014, it was, you know, in the Ferguson times where all that kind of is going on, and, you know, people have controversial like views about what that looked like and why it was and all that. But we did a protest that I led here because of all of it. And I remember that I had all my permits. I had a time frame that we were allowed to do it outside the campus and everything. Someone had heard about it, called the university and said that Trey Giles was going to lead a race riot down to the university to burn down the Christmas tree at the Christmas tree lighting ceremony in the name of racial reconciliation. Wow. And I was like, dude, are you kidding me? I'm like the president of 4 organizations on this campus. I love Fort Hays, you know, like, what do you mean? So we did our protest, and these guys are driving around in this truck and have a megaphone. They're yelling N-word this and F and this and that. Police are parked the wrong way in a one-way trying to watch us. Right? And I'm just like, man, over like 20 people standing on a patch of grass with some signs, not doing anything. I'm like, people are so resistant to this conversation, and I've experienced that it is a real thing here, you know, and some of that is blatant and outward, but I mean, there's other times where it's speculation, right? Like I could easily be wrong, but it felt as if that I was being targeted for what I looked like. And I mean, I've been pulled over multiple times in the Western Kansas I-70 corridor, and just been like, why? And I've asked the officer, like, why did you pull me over? He said, you were speeding. I said, well, how fast over was I going, sir? He said, I can't tell you because if I tell you how fast over you're going, then I have to give you a ticket. I don't know police rules, regulations, that might be true. But to me, it was like, you didn't find no other reason to do anything with me, and so now you're just telling me something. That's what it felt like. Or I pulled off from a restaurant here in town, and I mean, literally, before I could pull out of the parking spot onto the main street, I was putting on my seatbelt. And so, I mean, technically, you could say maybe I drove for 2.2 seconds without a seatbelt, and I get pulled over and ticketed for not having a seatbelt on while I'm driving. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, what are you? I mean, is it because I just ate at the queue and you think I'm drunk or something? Like, what do you mean? Like, I had a hangover burger and ain't hungover, you know? And so I ran into a lot of things here, and it's a real thing. It's a real conversation that needs to happen in Western Kansas, and I've experienced a lot of things based upon my race, and have talked to other people, especially Asian, Latino, and Black people and students who've lived around here who have experienced things. You know, we have students here from China, exchange students, and students here, for some reason, it's more acceptable to be like, oh, those Chinese students smell this way, and when they do this, and they can't speak any English, and like speaking in some weird accent. Or talking about Latino students and how they're taking jobs and this and that and this, and like, man, what are you talking about? Like, these are just students here studying, born in America, same as you and me. You know, even in Western Kansas, a lot of them were born. Yeah. And it's an interesting conversation, man. Race in Western Kansas is a real conversation that needs to be had for sure.
And not just his placation, but I don't think it gets said enough. I just want you to know how that hurts. I hurt with you. I wish that didn't happen. And I don't know what else to ever say, and I know I certainly can't apologize on behalf of other people, but I hurt with you in the midst of that. And I've seen it here in this campus too.
Yeah.
And I know Friday and Saturday nights are different than, there's an elevated time
yeah.
in Hays, Kansas for a lot of things that aren't always positive, and I've been around a lot of that going on at those times too. So anyway, for what it's worth, I hurt with you.
Yeah. Love you, man. I
can say
appreciate
any
that.
more than that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are going to struggle even hearing it from me, believing that even happens.
Yeah.
But I have no doubt that it does.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stories.
What about the ones that aren't they know better, I guess you should say, and not intentionally trying to be, like what my friend called me out on.
Mm-hmm.
Use myself, for example. If
Yeah.
I've done, are there things that we do or say that really basically sound or look racist?
Yeah.
That we may not even realize that we're doing.
I could be even a little playful with one. Is like when I was a youth pastor, and it don't matter, I could have worked at any church, it don't matter what church, and I would have white people come up to me and talk about my hair and just instantly start touching my hair without me saying yes to that. And it's just like, what is this, a petting zoo because my hair is different? You know what I mean? Like, and they're the nicest people. They love me dearly. But it's just this thing of like, oh, your hair's different, I'm just gonna like pet it. Like, no, like I would never ever go up to some white person and be like, yo, your hair, just like, wow. Like, what? That is
That's
weird, you know?
weird.
So I guess when I touch your hair, that's weird.
That's weird. Let's stop touching my
It's kind of strange, right? Or let's see here, that, or, you know, okay, I'll get this one a lot. And you have to take it with a grain of salt, right? And I'm not here to say every little thing is it's because of race. No, like, but there is some. Or when I go speak somewhere new in Western Kansas, or someone reads a blog post of mine, one of the comments I always hear is either, man, he is well spoken, or that was well written. And it's like, thank you. First, I want to just say, like, I appreciate that. I do want to be well spoken, right? I do got my ghetto slurs, and I'm proud of them, right? Or I do want to write well. Like, I'm about to go to seminary and get a master's. Like, I would love to write in a way that is sophisticated and captivating, you know? But it's like, when my other friends post stuff, and I even run a blog and all of this, it's like the first comment that usually comes out is not, oh, wow, that was well written, or wow, that was well spoken. And to me, what that is saying, even though it's not so aggressive, it's that, man, for a black person who typically when I see them on TV or hear them in music, they don't sound so educated and prim and proper, right? But you do, and like, I want to applaud you for that. And it's like, why are you saying that? You know what I mean? And it's little things like that, you know what I mean? Or a lot of it really is just conversations in the home, you know, is my friends have told me how their parents talk to them about certain groups of people. And I really believe in Western Kansas, the issue is more with our Latino and Asian populations because there's more Asians and Latinos here due to the university. And like the culture at large, like there's a lot of Hispanic people in Kansas. You know, I think the black issue is a real one. But I think the conversation that people have against like Mexican immigrants or the Honduran immigrants, like that's also a real conversation, you know? And so right now we have the hashtag Black Lives Matter, which I know I just said that some of y'all want to tune out, but it's like, you can't continue to say all lives matter until like every singular one does. And to say like, let's do these blanket statements, take care of everyone, like that doesn't work. You can't create systemic change to everything at once. Like you have to focus on little pieces at a time. You know what I mean? Like we don't just say, I'm just gonna make up a new example because some of y'all have read my blog. It's just like, we don't say get educated all the time and you're trying to become an accountant. You gotta take an accounting class and you gotta take this class. You gotta work on each piece to then formulate this larger education, right? And all that, and I gotta be careful not to go on my soapbox even about how we do this with like pro-life, right? Like Christians in Western Kansas and then also in the whole Bible Belt, we're like, yo, pro-life. But I'm like, do we really mean that? It's like we're anti-abortion for sure. That's what everyone is talking about. But why is the death penalty a higher usage rate in the Bible Belt? Like, why are we the first ones to be so excited to, I wouldn't say excited, but willing to send soldiers to war, right? Like, we're just instantly like, yep, we gotta go do this, gotta win it. You know, it's just like, why are we so quick to put up a wall to block out people who are trying to escape places where their kids are being murdered? Like, it's just, we politicize things like hashtag Black Lives Matter or pro-life, and it doesn't mean these things from our beautiful, like, walking with Christ stance. It's a political stance that we take, you know?
Well, and speaking of the Black Lives Matter, you said you went in your soapbox, but I can tell you, I was one of those that, maybe this leads in some more dialogue, I was one at the beginning of this round of this, everything going on, where people would talk about Black Lives Matter, and then you would hear someone say all lives matter, and then they'd be in trouble. Mm-hmm. And I was like, why are you getting upset about them saying all lives matter? You know, because, and again, I know I've come to the realization, a big part of it is, out of some of the things I'll ask you about, is a fear and a defensiveness because of what we think could happen if we step into this. Yeah. That I still do think needs to be addressed, but that's where our initial reaction is. I don't want to just say that, even though I believe Black Lives Matter, I don't want to totally give into that and just say that, because now what is that going to lead to if I say it? Yeah. So I struggle with that. That was one of those things where, and people in my church know, other than the fact it's helped us through this COVID situation, I hate Facebook conversations. Yeah. It's not a conversation. It's a soapbox, and then everybody that's on your side is going to agree with you, and everybody that's not, you know, is already going to be, and all it's doing is creating more hate. Mm-hmm. I've watched Facebook conversation, and maybe there's been a few, but most of them, I'll watch it on purpose and see the conversation. I have yet to see two people go, you know what? I hear you. I agree with you. Usually it ends up with one going, I'm just going to go ahead and bow out, because it just gets worse, and it's like creating more hate. That was happening when I'm reading these things to me, and I just didn't get the whole thing of, why am I so wrong to say all lives matter? Jesus loves the little children, and we would go through all the color, you know, all that stuff, and like, why am I so wrong? You wrote something that I thought was really good that actually helped me stop and think about it. You remember that? Yeah. How you compared it?
In a recent blog, I put, you know, if I was at a rally, and I know some of our viewers have experienced one of their family members dealing with breast cancer, and I'm at a rally trying to get more funding for breast cancer specifically, because we know that is a specific strand of cancer that needs to be addressed so we can get rid of and eliminate this ail to our population, right? So I'm like, breast cancer sucks, like, so we need this money, we need this policy, whatever, like, breast cancer sucks. Someone comes up to me and they're like, well, all cancer sucks. I'm gonna look at them and I'm just gonna be like, well, duh, all cancer sucks. But like, right now, I gotta make sure that we do what we need to do to get rid of breast cancer, and then we can move on to the next cancer. It's like, we're working on cancer, yeah, but breast cancer is its own, that needs its own attention.
And your heart is wrapped around that one.
Yeah.
Your heart isn't wrapped because you're aware of the consequences of that particular cancer in your particular life.
Yes.
And so when you say something, it's because of your own personal experience, and you're not broadening it, nor would we expect you to. We'd want to hear specific. You're dealing with this one area. Why would you speak to an area that's beyond that? So yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, because we can't possibly see, even in that example, you can't possibly understand the big picture, but I can maybe understand the hurt you're going through, specific to breast cancer or to your circumstances in your life.
Yeah.
You just told 5 stories that most of us will never. I certainly have never dealt with anything close to that. And you probably got 50.
Yeah.
So I mean, and like we said, some of it's just ignorance because we don't want to hear it and we don't want to believe it. But that what you're experiencing is true to you, and without us being willing to go to where you are, we can't possibly understand it.
Yeah.
So I do think it's part of our own pride saying, "Wait, my life matters just as much, so I don't want to be listening to what happened here."
And that's on both sides. Like, I have a lot of friends who live in predominantly black cultures now on the East Coast, West Coast, what have you, wherever, Dallas. And like, I've had black friends who are taking it so far to be like, just put all black people in leadership, da 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 da. And I'm like, man, you gotta be careful. It's like, you're not trying to only elevate your people, like, you're trying to create an equitable system. And that means that we're trying to get it to the place to where everyone has these opportunities at an equal rate. And like, how do you do that? That's what everyone's fighting and talking about, right? But it's like, you're not trying to make it to where all black people are leading over the white people, or all Latino people are like, no, it's just like, we're trying to open up equal access and opportunity and governance and policing over everyone at an equal rate. And like, but like, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we might need to do a lot of efforts to propel some African American leaders, right? So they can then take those stances and they can create laws to where then the regular old Black Joe can have an opportunity as well, you know?
Well, I'm glad you kind of went to that, and going back to just the whole, your illustration with cancer, if nothing else, it helped me go, okay, now I get what they're saying at least. And even at that level, it was good for me to pull back and not be so defensive and go, well, that makes sense. Now, I do understand, and I think it's in every way on every side. There's some that don't have the mentality, and they're going to make it harder to come back to that because they're doing what you're saying. I'm glad you bring that up, because I think from people I've been talking to, and some of it's from my own personal feelings, is I do believe Black Lives Matter, and we do need to do what we need to do to show that and to live that. I mean, not just to say that. The fear I have is we're an emotional people who get caught up in emotional things, and the pendulum goes like this and this and this, and what you're saying is going on. And I think one of the fears and one of the things that makes it defensive is, when do we cross that line from equal opportunity to special opportunity? And where and I'm going to share this from something, the reason this is on my mind is because of something that's happened in a family, and it was my cousin's. He's one of my really good friends out in Portland. He's married to my cousin, and his dad was going out to get the mail one night and was struck and killed by a car. And come to find out, it was driven by someone who was here illegally, who did not have insurance, and I'm not sure if even had a license or not. But it was in Oregon, which is a sanctuary state. And so guess what? They can't do a thing to that guy. And now he walks around in that town, and my cousin, I'll just call him my cousin, was sharing with me that he and his brother and them, they struggle because the guy, though it was an accident and everything, literally killed his dad. But because of what's been put in a place where it's not equal opportunity now, because he said then what really got him was not long after that, he gets in the mail to pay his auto insurance. Because I'm following the laws, I'm living here, all this kind of stuff, and he said, I was at a point where I went, why should I pay my auto insurance? And you know, there's a fear in that. How do we fight that? The other thing, the other day got an email that says, as a church, now you need to look to hire a Black person on your staff. Obviously, I'm in a little church, we just literally can't afford to hire who we can. I have no problem with that if they're called and qualified, but to do it just because of that. If you wanted to come be a part of our staff, I'd have no problem. But it has nothing to do with the color of your skin. It's because it's you. But it feels like now I have an extra pressure that if someone were to come or we were to look at that and I were to say no, kind of like we see it in the NFL with the Rooney Rule type thing. But if I were to say no, I'm automatically being branded that's because you're racist. No, maybe they're just weren't there. I mean, I don't have that same pressure if another white person comes. So how do we deal with that in your eyes? Like, how do we keep from getting emotional, caught up in all this, and setting things up that now goes beyond equal opportunity to now you're asking me to do something that might not even be a wise idea?
Yeah. I mean, these are huge questions, right? They're huge. And I think, like, what's so hard about it is, like, I'm sure people have maybe heard of this study they did about even resumes, right? To where it was like the exact same resume was put out, but all they did was change the names. And they had one name that sounded white and one name that sounded black. And the name that sounded white, though it's the exact same resume, got called back at a high rate compared to the other one. And it's like, well, what can you possibly do to change that? Because, like, that's all perception. It's all, and so much of this stuff is just like, you can make like, you're trying to fight for laws and changes, but it's like, how do you change human perception, right?
Well, or the human condition. I mean, that would be the question I have. Is this human nature?
Tribalism almost.
Are we fighting human nature?
Because you can't legalize or govern the heart. I mean,
why do you think Jesus spent so much